They check in at number 6. So again, as we mentioned, we are essentially at the midway spot of the season. Matt, I'm going to start with you. What are some of the trends you've seen? What have we learned so far in college football?
Well, it's been an exciting first half of the season. I thought going into the season, the whole talk was Alabama and Clemson. And will they have a rematch of the national championship game? Is it good for college football? We sat up here on our preview show and answered that. And that just hasn't been the case. I firmly believe there are 6 to 8 football teams right now in the top 10 that have a legitimate chance of making a college football playoff and playing for a national championship game.
What you're speaking to is parity.
Right,
and I think coming into the season, we thought that the best conferences were the SEC and the Big Ten. And what we're seeing now, especially if you look at the Power 5 teams and their non-conference play versus other Power 5 teams, the Pac-12 has been more competitive. The Big 12 has been more competitive. But by and large, there's a lot of parity. Why is there so much parity? Well, 3 of the 5 teams right now in the AP poll, they have transfer quarterbacks of various degrees, but transfer quarterbacks. And so I think what you're seeing now is players, they're taking advantage of the portal, or they're becoming grad transfers, and they're moving on, and they're leaving their previous team. They're going somewhere else where there's an opportunity. Right. I think that's one of the biggest things. That's why you're seeing some of the talent spread out, where guys are going to find opportunity away from that. It wasn't like that back when we played, man. I felt like when players went to transfer, you're hanging me out the dryer. Yeah. You're leaving the coach that you went to sign and play for.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first college football playoff ranking, it comes out in just 17 days. We're going to beat the committee to the punch right now with our Big Noon Kickoff top 6. So we secretly took in our guys' top 6 picks the other day, totaled them up. Here's how it shook out. LSU is your Big Noon Kickoff number 1 right now, followed by the Buckeyes, Bama, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and the defending champs, the Clemson Tigers. We're going to do a quick hand test. Who here had LSU at number 1? Boom, boom. Clean sweep. So, Coach, why are they number 1 for you?
Well, I think every coach, especially in that, is starting to have, I used to call them State of the Union meetings with your team, because everyone's starting to talk now about the college football playoff. Once you get to 7, 8, 9 weeks of the season, and I think, and I have very strong opinions about that. It's who you played and who you beaten. And LSU made the conscious decision to schedule home and home at Texas. And I'm a big fan of that. I think college football needs to see that. I think you need to reward teams that go do that. They beat 2 top 10 teams. Do I think they're the very best or best roster? I think Alabama and Ohio State probably have the best roster, but that's a think. I know that's very subjective. We'll get to that at some point. Take subjectivity out of it. Take objective. They've beaten 2 top 10 teams, 1 on the road, no question. Do I think they're the most talented? But once again, that's my opinion. No one should care about your opinion. It's what you do on the field. Yep. I'm very impressed so far with them, and I have Ohio State number 2, Bama 3.
Clemson's unbeaten. You have them all the way down at number 6. Why so low, Reg?
I did have Clemson all the way down to number 6 because what have you done lately? And it feels like we're rewarding teams based off of what they did last year. And Clemson, they were 1 2-point conversion away from almost losing to North Carolina. And that's an issue because I can make cases for Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Ohio State. All these other teams have more impressive wins. Yes, Clemson is the defending champs, but what does that matter for this year? What does that mean for right now? And again, I just think that we can't reward teams based off of what they did last year because you get new players, sometimes new coaches. Everybody starts 0-0, and that's the way it should be.
I think there's 2 trains of thought here. Some people feel like, well, Clemson won it last year, so we give them the benefit of the doubt, even though their schedule hasn't been that tough. You guys had 1 national championships or 1 national championships, and you had to defend that title. Tell me a little bit about what it's like wearing that going into the next season when people are saying, well, they don't look as good as they did a year ago when they won a national championship.
Well, first of all, we've talked about it, coaches. It's very hard to repeat in general and to go undefeated in college football. And I think I would go back to 2003, and this was the BCS era, so it was much different than how we view these teams now in the playoff era. But I remember we were sitting there at the end of the season. I think we were 11-1, and Oklahoma and Kansas State were playing in their conference championship game. Oklahoma got upset, but still stayed in the top 2 to play LSU, where we were at 3, and we thought we should have jumped to number 2 to get into that national title game. And what I say that is because in 04 and 05, we realized even with the BCS system, we had to be perfect because anything can happen at the end of the season. And that's kind of the mindset we had in 04 where we finished undefeated. And then 05, especially after midway through, we had the tough game against you guys, and then we battled back, and we thought, man, we have to be really good and dominant every single game and finish undefeated. This is a little bit different, the playoff, because because subjectively, we're all, there's so much different criteria that goes into who gets in the top 4. So it's a different era, but it's tough. It's tough to do.
I learned yesterday that if you want to agitate Reggie, just remind him that only 4 teams make the playoff.
Expansion.
I don't
Let's go to 8.
understand it. I don't understand. We need more teams in the playoff system. We got so many good teams playing good football right now, especially from the SEC and the Big Ten. Both those conferences are dominating the top 10 teams right now.
Another thing I learned, Coach gets agitated by the formula that's out there to say who are the 4 best teams. We're working on changing that, though, Coach, aren't we?
Well, I got one right here.
Right. No, that's legit. You do have it. That's
absolutely.
Yeah, we're working on that.
And I think the committee does a good job. It's an imperfect system.
Right.
Take subjectivity out of it. There has to be mandates. For example, I think you should go on the road. You go home and home with an opponent. You in a top 25 team. You have to go do that. Get rewarded for that. Some teams don't go on the road and play. How is that fair to teams that make decisions that go? Yeah. I think you need to play 9 conference games. Some teams play 8, some people 9, and you go. You get rewarded for who you beat. When I hear someone say look test or I think, that's not fair. And here I'm going to give you an example. 2014, we're playing Wisconsin. And I know in my heart, and plus over the headsets are reminding me, I have the ones in there. We're winning 45-0 in the 3rd quarter. I leave them in because I don't think the eye test and people think is going to get enough to bump TCU and Baylor.
Right.
First of all, the player's welfare and safety is at risk now. Why are you keeping that kid in there? Take him out of the game. But I had to protect our school and our team and try to put more points. And then sportsmanship. I don't agree with that. Did I do it? I did it. Because I had a job to do, and I was get Ohio State in the playoff.
Yeah.
Do I think that's right? That's wrong. Because the eye test or I think, take that out of the equation. Yeah. Put a point system together. When you get a win over a top 25 team, that counts for something. When you win a top 5 team on the road, that counts for something. That also penalizes the teams that don't do that.
Yeah.
We're going to right those wrongs on that sheet. We're going to work on it all week.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.